If you think about Ethernet in the cloud, think Brocade. Not surprisingly, the next speaker is KP Unnikrishnan, Marketing Director, Asia Pacific, Brocade. As APAC Marketing Director of Brocade Communications, Unni is part of the APAC leadership team and responsible for executing the Brocade strategy across the region. He is focused on driving marketing excellence in APAC to build brand awareness for Brocade in the networking market and spearhead integrated programs to help bring the Brocade One unifying network architecture and strategy to the market. His topic is efficient cloud networks for better economics. To make IT more agile and aligned to the needs of today's business, the network must be able to deliver data center class reliability and scalability, not just to the edges, but into the cloud as well. For efficient cloud computing, the ideal network needs to be truly flat. Ethernet fabric architectures share information across nodes and may be managed as a single logical chassis, greatly simplifying management and reducing operational overhead. Attend this session to learn how true Ethernet fabric allow data center teams to create efficient data center networks that just work. Please join me in welcoming KP Unnikrishnan.
Thank you, Ashman. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I wanted to thank UBM for the opportunity to make this presentation. I think you folks have been listening to a lot of cloud since the morning, and I think one of the most important ways that we look at it, it's one of the most beaten up five-letter word in the industry today. Everybody talks about the cloud. I was with an individual the other day on the flight, and he was telling me that we were talking about the businesses, and he wanted to know what we do. The first comment he made was, oh, actually, even I'm using everything on the cloud. So I said, very interesting. What do you do? I run a taxi service. I said, well, interesting. Now, how does a taxi service run everything on the cloud? And his view was, he's posted everything using Google Docs, Microsoft, and to an extent Facebook, which he says I don't need to own, so I guess everything is on the cloud. So I think it's there very much in omnipresent as far as the way we look at it, but the more important aspect of cloud, 4 to 5 years back, people used to think it's a hype. You've heard Mrs. Lele a little while back. I think it's finally arrived at a situation where it's no more a hype, but it's a reality. What I'm going to do in the next 20-odd minutes is to kind of give you how the cloud technologies are evolving. I wanted to share with you some of the things that we see, but more importantly, also to highlight the fact how you need to have a network, robust infrastructure, which really helps you to take your infrastructure to the cloud. I want to do a 20-second pitch about my company. Most of you guys may not have heard about this, but we are today 75 to 80% within your data center in this part of the world, 60% globally. We are the leaders in the end-to-end networking space. 90% of the internet touch points are today powered by Brocade, and we do only networking. That's what we are focused on. We don't do camcorders, we don't do flip cameras, we don't do unified communication, we don't do hardware, and we also don't make funny videos. So that's a nutshell about Brocade. So in our interactions with the various CIOs, and I'm sure as a CIO or folks who are working in terms of building an infrastructure, these are the basic key imperatives that you would be either questioning yourself or working within an organization to build. One is reducing cost and consolidation. I think till a couple of years back, as a CIO, he would still say, you know what, my budgets are not flat. I have a 1%, 2%, 4% increase in my IT budgets. Keeping aside some of the greenfield projects right now, unfortunately, with the economic scenario, that's all changed. So obviously, all CIOs are being pressurized to change the way they're making investments in terms of their infrastructure and consolidate everything. I've been in this industry for quite some time, and it sometimes shocked me when I go back to my first customer sometimes, and I speak to them. Some of them are still there. Some of them at least have the infrastructure. Many of them have not changed what they're doing. They've just gone on building in terms of what they have done or what they purchased 10, 15, 20 years back. And the good part and the bad part as well, that's not considered legacy, but that's considered complex. And more companies are being pressurized to change and reduce the complexity within the system. Again, it's all linked back to reaching to the customer. How do you provide brand new services to the audience? You could be a telecom company or a service provider. In the end of the day, you're linked back to ARPU, average revenue per user. And unless you use an infrastructure that gets you to change and reach out to a customer within a matter of days, hours, and even maybe weeks, you're going to be losing out on the first customer advantage. The last but not the least, 10 to 15 years back, the IT department was a support infrastructure. Today, 33% of the CIOs carry a P&L statement, and this is coming from one of the analysts, which basically goes back to the point that, just putting an infrastructure together and being a support function to an organization is not beneficial enough. You need to be innovating to drive the business. So one of the important things that we see is movement to the cloud in terms of collapsing a lot of these challenges that you as an organization have. One of the words that we've coined is virtual enterprise, where you have a virtual environment where your storage, your compute, your applications are all going to be moving all over the place, and you as an end user are going to be agnostic to the fact that it's really not your challenge to figure out where the application is coming from or where the compute power is coming from. You need to access information at any given point of time, and you need to use an environment which helps you address that. So if, as an organization, you look at the various aspects of building your virtualization infrastructure to the cloud, you need to do a server virtualization, you need to kind of build it with scale and automation. That's your first stage or your third stage in the overall flow of taking it to a private cloud. After that, you bring in a whole lot of cost reduction, you build in a whole lot of application, you get in peak loads, and you start moving it to a hybrid cloud. The first and the second part, which is a private and a hybrid cloud, pretty much available today, and I'm going to share some insights about it in a little while. Moving on to the last part, the public cloud is where it gets more interesting, because now suddenly it's a question of where does your data reside, maybe at a third party. One of the things that we do at Brocade, and that's something that we've been highlighting for quite some time, the question mark that you need to ask yourself or your CIO or your IT folks is, what are you doing 5 levels below that? What are you doing on your network infrastructure space? One of the things that the industry is moving towards is what is known as the fabric. Like fabric, it's like a mesh of network. It basically helps you in terms of optimization of your network. It helps you in terms of getting high throughputs and efficiency. It helps you in terms of scaling out. It's not about ripping out, but it's more about scaling up. And last but not the least, in terms of automation. This is what is changing the way the network infrastructure is being built up. Now, if you're going to look at some of the technologies, and I'm not going to position here it as a product spiel, but what are the features that need to come into it? It needs to keep it up 99.999. You cannot have a cloud strategy with a lousy network. That's the end of your strategy. You need to have a network that adapts to your business. Your business is evolving. Your consumers are changing. Your competitors are changing. Can you use your infrastructure to evolve and adapt to your changing business needs? Very important. Last but not the least, again, do you want to put up a recruitment ad of masters and doctorates to manage your network? No. You need to run it with your efficient system. You need to have it with your existing network managers. You need to ensure that they're well-trained enough, but they don't need to be doctorates. So you need to have a network which is pretty simple and efficient to manage. So what comes the next part of this, and Ayushman alluded to it, the industry is evolving where all the features and the technicalities and the advantages of a data center network is now being taken onto the Ethernet part of it. So Ethernet or the local area network scenario till a couple of years back, or actually even now as it's evolving, is a very fixed, rigid topology. 3 jobs back, I used to be with a networking company. I'm shocked that many of my customers still continue to use the equipment that I sold to them. So that gives you an idea about the kind of changes that's happening in that segment today. So if you take all these features in a data center networking space, that is the fabric, and put it onto a local area network, these are some of the trends that's happening in the industry where it's going to become literally a new paradigm shift in the way networks are going to be built. It's going to be optimized for virtualization and cloud, and that's again an underlying point, because end of the day, and I'm being a little repetitive over here, you can have the best servers and the best hardware and the best applications, but if your network fails, that's the end of your strategy. You need to have it flatter, faster, and latent. You need to scale. Again, a little bit of an anecdote over here. if you really question yourselves or look back into your industry, how many of us were using video streaming as close as 4 to 5 years back? Very few, very less. That's changing. By the year 2015, 2016, 75 to 80% of your internet traffic is going to be on video. Imagine the kind of stress that's going to be putting onto your network. So it needs to evolve and it needs to change. And last, again, as I said, you need to have something which is very simple, easy to manage. Today, it's not your data center or your business centered around Bangalore or Delhi or Beijing. It's global. So are you going to be shipping your human beings or your human capital across to all these countries to manage a network, configure the network? Absolutely not. You've got to be sitting within your offices and managing this whole network part of it. And I don't just mean an NMS, which is a network management server. I'm talking about a resilient network which can evolve and which can be run the way the network manager manages it based out of the headquarters. Just want to take a little bit of a step in terms of highlighting how this is different. So what you see on your right is basically the traditional classical hierarchical infrastructure which is today present in most parts of the world. What are the challenges? It's inflexible. It brings in a lot of complexity. You need to really make rip and replace replacements in some of the cases. It's inefficient. If there's a system failure, that's the end of it. You need to send somebody across, make manual changes over there. It's complex. It's just a legacy complexity that's been constantly being built up in the last couple of years. And it's expensive because, frankly, if you look at it, go back to your vendor and say, hey, listen, I've got a choke in my network. He's going to throw another box at you, right? So it's not about fixing a problem with your existing setup, but it's fixing a problem by throwing yet another technology or a product at you. What Ethernet Fabric does is it kind of collapses the whole thing and helps you right from your stage where you need it to scale, because that's where your business is going to go. You need it to be efficient because it needs to be super efficient, if I may use the word, in terms of how the data flows happen, how information access happens. It needs to be simple and it needs to be fast. But if you really look at these 4 words, this is what your underlying strategy on your cloud infrastructure also needs to be. You cannot have a cloud strategy by which you don't have data flows happening, you have an inefficient network. So it really boils back to the fact how this kind of technologies can really help you as an organization to move towards a faster cloud. So some of the benefits, and again, it's automated, it's reliable, it's evolutionary. But again, spending a little bit of time on the last part, which is the evolutionary part of it. BYOD, again, a 4-letter word that gets thrown around a lot, but bring your own device. It's a reality today. Does your organization, few of them still do, still insist that you're going to be using only this application with this server, with this software, sitting in my office to access your information? My example, I run home every evening. I don't carry my laptop. The gadgets I have at home are all wired into my office network. I can do everything that I'm doing working out of home on a totally different gadget, running a different OS, what I could do with the gadgets that I have at home in the office. Many organizations are moving towards that. So with the iPad 3s and the various tablets coming along, this is a ground reality which people have to accept. Video streaming, I already spoke about it. Unified communications, mobile applications. 4 to 5 years back, imagine you as a bank. You would tell your customer, you want to withdraw money? Guess what? Come to the bank. Today, if you ask yourself this question, how many of you guys have gone to a bank physically? It'll be very few, it'll be very minimal transaction. Most of us do it out of our homes, most of us do it out of various gadgets. Guess who's getting the choke? It's the network. It's your network which is facing the biggest brunt of all these changes. So today with Fabric technology, it's future-proofing it. It really helps you evolve in the way technologies need to be built. It needs to help you in terms of future technologies coming in, and more importantly, it saves your investments for the future. Oops, sorry. Again, some of the features coming out of these products and technologies is, again, going back to the point, you used to sell networking at once upon a time at a couple of Mbps. That's evolved. It's just not the speeds anymore. It's about convergence. You can't have silos of a data center LAN and a data center SAN and a different kind of a WAN all kind of sitting all over the place in a silo. It all needs to be converged. You need to have technologies making that happen, because your cloud transformation and your cloud strategy cannot be in a silo again. So while we are at that, and I wanted to kind of digress a little bit, One of the important features when you build your cloud strategy is about how you take your various applications and your data from your existing data center and take it onto the cloud. Important point is, how do you give the same features and the same benefit to the other data centers? Because no organization today talks about just one data center, right? You're talking about multiple data centers sitting in different parts of the world. And that is where the whole VMs start coming in. And so what we talk about these things is, how do you take these clouds across the various distances? How do you get interconnectivity and interflow of clouds? Is this happening today? Yes, it's beginning to happen. Are we doing it? Maybe not. But it might be a good idea for you as a consumer to have this as part of your strategy. Why is this important? Because it's going to start helping you pooling resources, and that's very important and very critical as you evolve your infrastructure. It's going to give you the migration between the data centers. So again, that's important because you're just not honing your risk into one segment of your data center, but you're actually evolving it into multiple segments. And today, if you really look at it, you're not having a business which says, I have a data center here and maybe a data center which is half a mile away. It could be across countries, it could be across continents. And again, it throws a challenge back at you to figure out, how do you get the best efficiency out of something like this? Now, if you really take a question back about why is this important? Because when you start looking at an organization with your cloud strategy or the way you're building your infrastructure towards this, some of the challenges that you could have, and this is purely IT, nut and bolt fixing, it's all about server maintenance, right? So these are basics that we need to start taking into account. How do we make sure that if tomorrow there's a server maintenance within my infrastructure, how do I manage this? Server load balancing, again, very critical, because you cannot have too much of a choke coming in your existing setup. So how do you shift it across between various infrastructures? Data center consolidation and expansion that's happening. The second last point, very important. This is, a lot of companies have started making their 5 to 10 to 20% cost saving based on where the energy consumption is cheaper. It's becoming a reality today. A lot of organizations are beginning to invest into places where they feel that, hey, the energy consumption is far lesser. My organization, we've got a huge data center. Just because we built it water-cooled, a green data center, the government of California gave us a huge SOP because that's the kind of saving that we brought into the industry. So a lot of organizations are beginning to look at all these things. Last, again, disaster. But we might just pull it off and say, hey, listen, this is something that we can't control. But I think this is a statistic that would maybe open up your eyes. Close to about 80% of the natural disasters were from weather-related events in 2010. Maybe we've been agnostic to it, but that's something that's a ground reality. So while we're making all these kind of investments, while we're making all these kind of strategies, are we taking into account force de majeure? And this is, again, where something like this comes in. So what I wanted to do was, again, share a little bit of an example of something that we did with a client when the unfortunate Japan earthquake happened. So 246, earthquake hits about 45 miles offshore. So you've got all your mission-critical applications, and you've got your Tier 2 applications sitting in Sendai. At 2:49, which is exactly 3 minutes, the super efficiency in Japan, a tsunami warning was issued. At 2:57, 7 minutes, the IT department wakes up, right? So keep in mind, this is 2:57 p.m. The good part is everybody's awake, everybody's in the office, but the IT department reacts. And what then happens is, in a span of exactly 45, 50 minutes, all the mission-critical applications start moving to Tokyo. So this is almost about 100 of the top mission-critical applications in that organization's moved, plus some of the Tier 2 and Tier 3 applications also moved. Think about the way that organization saved on their IT setup. So some of the things that really help make that happen, so you take the compute power within the organization, you tie it together with the virtual machines, you knit it all together with a fabric network, you have a storage which sits in together, and using an universal extension over a wide area network, this is then taken out into the other setup. Again, a food for thought for organizations who are looking at building a strategy, but also taking into account some of the natural disasters that could possibly happen in any part of the world. While it could sound a little bit futuristic, the fact is it's not, because we've seen customers do that in Japan. But the important point is these are organizations today in this part of the world who are using these technologies. Are they using it for exactly the same thing? Maybe yes, maybe no. But the important point is Fabric is a very critical component of what they're doing. Cloud is a very integral part of their strategy. They have been investing in terms of they've got the most robust and the scalable networks while they are building on a future 5 to 10 year plan. So to kind of summarize, and I know I've taken less time, and I'm sure Ayushman will be happy that I'm bringing everybody back on time. It's all about putting it all together, right? So the movement to the cloud is happening. It's a reality. It's no more a hype. Customers are doing it. If you're not doing it, it's a question that you need to ask yourself. And I'm maybe digressing from my core competency to something else, because every time I have a conversation with a CIO, the first question he asks me is, it's good, it's important, but what about security? I was having a conversation with a gentleman outside, and again, the security conversation came up. And I was in a forum about a month back where we had taken we were with about 150 of the top CIOs in Asia Pacific. And there was a session which was hosted by a security consultant. And a question he asked back to the same question that the CIO asked was, point, yes, security is a concern. Where do you put your money? You put it into a bank. How do you know how secure the bank is? Same concept. You trust the bank. You trust the system. And that is where you put your money in. Cloud is going to be like that. It's about the final trust that you bring into the system. It's a trust that you yourself would have in saying that, hey, this is where the industry is moving. This is where the advantages are. Yes, there will definitely be disadvantages. Me as a matured CIO need to figure out where do I draw a line, how do I differentiate, and how do I invest. Fabrics, as I said, it's here to stay. 2 years back, this was more of a concept. A lot of people were still soothsayers and saying, what is innovation in the network? Network is a bunch of cables put together with routers and multiplexers and tied together, and that's what your network is. The same set of people are today adapting it. The industry's moved, almost every technology vendor has adapted the Fabric. So it's a ground reality, it is here to stay, and this is something that I would strongly encourage you when you're building your infrastructure to seriously look at. And interdata connectivity, again, this is a little bit of a step going back to what happened in Japan, but it's about connectivity that will help your VM mobility between data centers. And that is what it's all about today as you build your cloud strategy. Wanted to thank you. I do hope it was a good use of your time. Yes, it could be a little bit controversial in some of the things that I threw back at you. But as I said, we are close to about a $3 billion company, and this is our bread and butter. This is what we do day in and day out. As I said, we don't do other interesting things like building funny videos, but the point is we spend a lot of time with network managers. We spend a lot of time with IT directors to really build this out. A huge advantage that we have in our business is 70% of this business comes to you through HP, IBM, Dell, Sun, Oracle, EMC, Hitachi Data System, NetApp. So we've got a very strong relationship, and these are just not a resale relationship. These are technology partnerships that we have with them. So while you may not be seeing Brocade or you may not be seeing Brocade employees, the conversation you have with any of these hardware infrastructure players includes a component of Brocade. Makes my life as a marketer a little bit of a challenge because the brand doesn't really come across to you on the face. But I would tell them that, why don't you go to your data center? If the machine looks like this, rip apart that logo and you'll see the Brocade logo behind that. And that's a reality. Thank you. And questions?
Questions, please, if you have any.
Please don't ask me any hard technical questions. I'm a marketing guy. Yes, sir.
Yeah, we have one there.
Yeah. Yes. So going back to, I don't know if you noticed that topography that I had built. So you have what is known as a rigid spanning tree, and I'm using the word. You want me to go back? Let me just quickly go and go. Actually, why don't do it the easier way? So if you look at the current infrastructure, and again, this is, as I said, it's an industry that's evolving. It's a typical what we call as a classical hierarchical architecture. It goes what is known by a north-south traffic flow, right? It's all set in terms of what is the traffic coming in, how does it move, what are the kind of changes, and it's all limited to your existing design. Now, if I were to look at a choke, for example, so let's assume you take this whole infrastructure and you're going to be putting it onto the cloud. Assume there's a choke in terms of transferring some of this data from here through a cloud into maybe another setup. If this choke is there, it stays as a choke because there is not enough of intelligence in these kind of networks to really help you make that happen. When you talk about a fabric, what it basically does, it collapses all of it and helps a traffic flow not only from a north-south but also an east-west setup, which basically means if there is a, and again, it fundamentally goes back to the protocol. What this uses is spanning tree. What this uses is today called as TRILL, T-R-I-L-L. Funny, but what it stands for is Transparent Interlock Loose Links. It's a protocol, and both the founders of spanning tree as well as the founder of TRILL is the same lady. And she herself had come back and said, 2 decades back, spanning tree made sense. Today, it's all about TRILL. So coming specifically back to your question, what Fabric does is it helps you scale up your network in terms of depending on your traffic. It helps you flatten your network in terms of depending on what are the chokes coming in. It helps you manage your network. You could be sitting in different part of the world or the country, and it helps you manage that network. And I'm not talking about data center. I'm not talking about your applications. I'm not talking about infrastructure. Sorry? Not really, not really. Sure, not really. So you're right from a connectivity point of view, right? You're right from a connectivity point of view. Let's talk about shifting your virtual machines through a data center from one part of the world to another part of the world in a seamless manner without losing data with the most efficient time. You need a network which flattens out. So the reason we use the word fabric is it basically puts in a lot of intelligence and flattens the network to make it a lot more of manageability features. And this also helps you in terms of tying down some of those chinks which you would have in the earlier kind of a network because of its inflexibility. Let's take an example of 5 years from today, you get a new networking technology which suddenly lands up. In an environment like this, you're talking about literally rip and replace. But when you talk about an environment like this, the feature, it's open standards. One important point, it's open standards based. It takes into account open flow. I don't know how many of you would have heard of software-defined networking, SDN, takes care of that. What it basically means is it gives you these features to help manage your network. Coming to a new technology, as long as it's a standard-based protocol, it fits into your existing system and integrates in your existing system. That's what the difference is. And I'll give you an example. So going specifically to a product, we've got a product which is the epitome of Fabric. We call it the Ethernet Fabric VDX series. Very different, very new. We launched about 2 years back. We are a relatively new networking company, right? If I walk into your organization and say, hey, listen, I've got the greatest product, you've got to throw everything out and just plug me in, you're going to kick me out. What VDX does is VDX integrates into your existing system and starts managing the whole thing as an independent unit. You can connect it to other network features and it starts integrating as one whole unit. So imagine you having VDX in multiple segments of that market. So you've already kind of cloud optimized that part of your network through this product. This is where it's evolving. I hope it answers it. Maybe a long-winded answer, and I apologize for that, but I hope it answers it. I'm sorry? See, it's a pipe. End of the day, it's a network is a pipe. So the technology component is right from how do you shift it from a 1 GB to a 10 GB to a 100 GB. How do you put in tools like HyperEdge? What is HyperEdge? HyperEdge helps you manage and flatten a network through a manageability feature which is inbuilt into the network. It is not an NMS, right? HyperEdge does that. How does it help you build new mobile applications onto a network without making radical changes in your existing system? This helps make that happen. So these are some of the basic, and I can definitely send more details to you, I think, paucity of time over here.
I think we have one last question there, so we'll take from. Okay.
Yes, yes. So that is one component of it. So again, going back to what a VXLAN and going back to another one of my diagrams, how this makes a difference is it brings in ICSCI, VTPI protocol features which are standards based today. So as long as you have a VXLAN which is from a vendor which is standard based technology, it integrates into the network. As simple as that. Which is why I'm reiterating the fact that industry is evolving so rapidly, technologies are evolving so rapidly, you cannot be tied down with a single proprietary technology or a network. It needs to be open standard based. And when you throw, jargons or when you throw new product technologies at me, as long as it's standard based, you can close your eyes, it gets integrated into the setup.
I'm afraid we have to take the other questions offline. And thanks, Unni, for that insightful talk and simplifying things as always. We'd like to offer you a small token of our appreciation.